The birth of a child is a natural event. All of us were born. The birth of any child makes history. But this is especially true with the birth of Jesus. The birth of Jesus was a simple and a human event. But everything that night was also heavenly and godly. It has become the source of hope for all people of all time. And that is why people gather at Christmas to pray, because it is a source of hope. We know the story of the birth of Jesus very well. At the heart of Mary and Joseph's journey to Bethlehem was that they were full of hope and expectations. A little bit like we were for Christmas this year, maybe 2 weeks ago. Yet their steps were weighed down by uncertainties that impacted them as they moved towards Bethlehem. And perhaps we've been impacted by some of these uncertainties also. When Mary and Joseph arrived in Bethlehem, they found themselves having to face perhaps one of the most difficult things of all. They faced Joseph's extended family. And Joseph's extended family were not altogether nice people. We often think that there was no room for Jesus or for Mary and Joseph at the inn, perhaps because they hadn't booked on Airbnb before leaving Nazareth. But in those times, with the census occurring in Bethlehem, all of Joseph's relatives were required to go to Bethlehem. All of the homes were Joseph's relatives. They knew Joseph. And it wasn't that, oh no, we're all full up. No one was going to provide a place for Joseph and Mary. And this sometimes people have to face at Christmas as well. Dysfunctional families, divisions within families, separation, perhaps even hatred. And this is what Mary and Joseph had to face. When we have difficulties and discord within our own families, know that Jesus, Mary and Joseph know how that feels. Christmas is not about bringing God into a perfect fantasy or to a children's story. And again, this Christmas, we unfortunately are not able to do all of the regular Christmas traditions because of the situation in our own city at the moment. But Christmas is about more than the parties, about the toys, the food, the drink. Christmas is about the hope of God coming into our world to bring light into the midst of those most dark moments in our lives. It is precisely at Bethlehem that the spark of God's love was set alight. In Bethlehem, there is a small opening for those who've lost their land, their country, their dreams, their fortunes, their family, those who've lost their health, and maybe even lost their faith and their ability to love others. Mary and Joseph, for whom there was no room, are the first to embrace the one who comes to give us all a home that is free from fear, isolation, and free from hurt. But accepting Jesus and turning to Jesus at Christmas in prayer, we can become the citizens of heaven, and that we're free from these dark experiences. We will never be turned away because there's no room for us at the inn. We will never be told that we're not good enough to enter a particular venue because we haven't brought the right paperwork with us. We didn't bring our phone. We didn't bring our vaccination certificate. We didn't bring our face mask. We all know what the experience of what this is like over the last few months. This won't happen with Jesus with us. We will never be told by God that we need to isolate or distance ourselves from the community of God, because we are part of an eternal community. Jesus brings healing to all the experiences of fear and of doubt. But we don't do this alone. That's hopefully something we've learnt over the last 2 years. You might be thinking, what does Jesus have to offer for us this Christmas? I'd like us to think about the role of the shepherds. Sometimes we think of the shepherds as nice guys who were sort of tending the flock. The shepherds are the first to hear the good news from the angels. But by reason of their work, the shepherds, who were men and maybe even women, they were forced to live and work away from the Jewish society. Their situation in life prevented them from observing the ritual prescriptions of the Jewish law. And as a result, the shepherds were considered unclean by Jewish law. They were outcasts. They were told to keep away from others. Their skin, their clothing, their smell, all of these betrayed them as being unclean and unworthy to enter into a synagogue to pray because they were unclean. They had to isolate, keep away from others. And the angels come to those who perhaps were most unclean and tells them to not be afraid. We hear, "Do not be afraid. Listen, I bring you news of great joy, a joy to be shared by the whole people. Today in the town of David, a Saviour has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord." The shepherds go, and they go and see, and they go and worship. Even though perhaps they were on the fringes, they were isolating from the rest of community, they go and worship. And they receive joy, acceptance, and they're part of God's family. The joy with which God comes to us this year comes to us in our fragility, in our brokenness, perhaps even in our darkness. We are encouraged to make a new social imagination and a new way for being a community of light in the midst of darkness and fear. We choose Jesus together, and we choose to not be afraid. Thank you to all of you who've come today who are not afraid, who've said, yes, we can gather, we can distance appropriately, but we can gather to worship. And our future is not one based upon fear, but based upon joy and hope. We choose Jesus, who is, as we're told in the book of Revelation, he is the Alpha and the Omega. And we choose the Alpha and the Omega in the midst of the Delta and the Omicron. Because we know the Alpha and the Omega will beat Delta and Omicron any day of the week. Jesus will win. That is our hope. People usually embrace relatives and friends at Christmas, perhaps not during COVID. And we embrace them with a hug, a kiss, maybe even a handshake. Jesus wants to touch our lives. Jesus wants to touch you, to embrace you this Christmas, to become part of you. The darkness and fear of recent times should not define the way we live as the light of Christ. We live with the joy of Christ in our life. We live the love of Christ. We live a hope for the future. And we live as a community of faith. This is who we are. Not a community of fear. Not a community of darkness, but one of light. We've all experienced darkness over the last 12 months in different ways. Darkness perhaps through our health. Darkness through physical, mental, psychological, even perhaps spiritual issues. But we turn to Jesus, who brings light and renewal in the midst of these dark times. Today is a beautiful day. We can see the sun is shining into this building. We experience the light of Christ. Let's be that light for others. Let's not just be the light today, but let's be the light always. And by doing this, we come to Jesus. We come to Jesus when we're dark. All of us have that moment of darkness, perhaps in our life, maybe even every day. And that's why we turn to Jesus, to fill us up with this light so we can go and share and bring the light to others. How often do people feel alone? How often do people feel overwhelmed, afraid, hurt, or simply lost? This is so common. We know, we hear about this every day. Let's not be the ones who perpetuate fear and darkness. Let's encourage others. Let's lift them up, not just for the next 5 minutes, but lift them up for eternity, because Jesus comes at Christmas to bring light, not just for a few moments, but for all time. Let us recommit to being this light for others. This evening, as the sun goes down, pray that you will have that joy of Christ in your life. And when it comes up tomorrow, spread the joy of Christ to others. Spread hope, spread faith, spread love. May the light of Christ bless us today on this Christmas and bless our whole world with the joy of the birth of Jesus.